Number 4 of the 20 plus sources of sizzling hot sellers, and I love this number 4. Number 4 got me the highest commission check I ever made in real estate, and here's how it goes. Non-owner occupied. Now the last one we talked about was out of state. So non-owner occupied can live out of state. In this case, it's simply someone who doesn't occupy the property, they live at a different address. So you know that it's some kind of an investment property. Now, when I first started making these phone calls, I didn't even know what I didn't know. Like, I was looking in the tax records, and if the property was 123 Main Street and they lived any place else, then they're non-owner occupied. I didn't even know how to figure out if it was a parking space or a gas station or a house or a condo. I mean, I was pure ignorance on fire. And here's the thing. Ignorance on fire is way better than knowledge on ice. Hello. So, Cami's making phone calls. She's calling. She calls this property. Hey. She gets Sylvia on the phone. Sylvia is a spitfire. Sylvia's in her 60s and she's owned this building for quite some time. She only lived 2 houses down. It was on Maple Street and she lived like 2 houses down, but it was non-owner occupied. Get Sylvia on the phone, build a little rapport. She's elderly, but she ain't slow and silly. She is all about it, right? So I talked to her about, has she ever considered selling her property? And she said, yeah, she was. And boy, was she was a hard cookie. But she actually came to my office. She came to my office to meet me because, come to find out, it was an 11-unit building. Now, I don't know where you are or what your marketplace is like, but for someone like myself who at the time, just to give you a point of reference, was used to selling $150,000 to $225,000 houses, this was an 11-unit building that we put on the market for $750,000. So this was a pretty big deal. And I didn't even know what it was when I called her. Ignorance was probably pretty bliss, because if I had known, maybe I would have been scared or something, had some weird mental hang-up about it. But Sylvia comes to the office, we do the paperwork, and the reason that she didn't want to meet me at the property was, of all these 11 units, she didn't even want her tenants to know that it was on the market. How do you sell an 11-unit commercial building without the tenants knowing? Well, that's another story for another day, because there's a lot of nuances to that, but the long and the short of it is, that building sold, and my commission check was $18,000. Now, I know there's some people out in the country and out in the world where $18,000 for one check, they feel like they're on food stamps. I get that. But for me, when my checks at the time were $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000, that was a pretty nice payday, and it was sold to another woman in her 80s who was doing a 1031 tax exchange, which means she was basically buying the property for cash, and the closing happened in about 15 minutes. Sat down for 15 minutes and walked away with $18,000. So I took that check, and I had on my vision board, while I was making phone calls, while I was prospecting, while I was envisioning my future, while I was making a better life for me and my daughter, on this vision board, I had a convertible Mustang. I wanted that car. I needed that car. I had to have that car. I was going to have that car. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know you're going to have something. So there was a white convertible Mustang on the edge of the road in downtown USA, where I lived at the time. Long story short, when that closing happened, I went and paid cash for that Mustang. And people said to me at the office, Cami, don't you know Ford stands for found on road dead? Don't you know what a money pit that thing is? Boy, they saw you coming. You're naive. They took advantage of you. And I said, no, you don't understand. Everybody loves a convertible Mustang. 6 years old to 60, everybody's going to look at that car, and my name, CamiBaker.com, is going to be all over it. I drove that car in 9 parades the first year, and I ended up sponsoring 9 antique car shows over the next 10 years with that car. So the moral of the story is, when we are out and we are living life and we are making phone calls and we are not afraid to talk to people, and we get some posture and we understand scripts and personalities and mirroring and matching and getting into that rapport with people, all kinds of things come to us. People, resources, relationships, listings, closings, and the car, for me in my case, that I was just meant to have. So non-owner occupieds, number 4. Now we're going to get into the top 3 that have brought me the most listings over a 15-year period, and I can't wait to share those with you too.